What is up guys, it's SSD Modern Warfare here and welcome back to another video. So in this video what we're going to be looking at is another PC tutorial on how to optimize an SSD. So yeah, basically I reinstalled my operating system due to my computer completely crapping itself and it forced me to reinstall the operating system. So all my SSD tweaks and optimizations have gone back to normal, gone back to the default. And I thought this would be a good opportunity to show you guys what I do to optimize my SSD so I can get better performance out of it, so that it boots up faster, so that it lasts longer over time, you know, it doesn't degrade in quality as much over time, and also to give us back some more storage space from Windows. Because if you have a small SSD, say you've only got 120 gigabyte SSD, the Windows installation does take up quite a bit of space off that, and some optimization tweaks we can do can give some of that space back to you to use as well. So yeah, that's basically what we're going to be doing in this video. We're going to be trying to optimize the SSD to boot faster, and we'll do a little comparison at the end and see if our tweaks have made a good impact and see how much of difference we get. So yeah, it's not just about boot times, it is about those other things as well, also read and write speeds, but boot times is kind of the main one. Everybody wants their SSD to boot up fast, and sometimes you can be disappointed when you get an SSD and you put it on there and it's actually booting quite slowly, definitely not as fast as you expected. So hopefully for you guys this video is for you. So what we're going to do first of all, so the first thing I'm going to do is show you a boot up of my computer from start to finish. What I've got is we're testing it from me turning it on and then how long it takes to boot from that point into the operating system and load up Google Chrome and NVIDIA GameWorks and see how long that takes. And then once we've done all of our optimization tweaks, we'll come back and we'll see if we've made a difference. So you can see the boot up times at the moment, they're not too bad. I mean, it's not the worst speed ever. I get into the operating system fairly quickly, but this can still be improved upon. So the first thing you're going to need is SSD Benchmark. I recommend you download this software. There'll be a link to it in the description that you can use to download it. And this is a great tool that we can use to assess our SSD. We can check the read and write speeds. We can check to see if there's any problems. So here we go, opened it up here. Immediately there's a problem right there, PC IDE-bad, standard dual channel PCI IDE controller is bad. I will show you guys how to sort that, but first thing you want to do is do a little test on the read and write speeds. So we're going to start and we're going to do a test, and that's our write speed. And there is our read speed. Once it calculates that, I'm just going to abort. Don't want to do the other tests, just this initial one. Okay, not looking great on the read and write speeds. So this is an SSD. This is a Samsung 850 Evo SATA SSD, and obviously SSDs will vary depending on which ones you have, especially if you're using like a PCI Express SSD or an M.2 SSD. You're going to get insanely fast speeds compared to SATA ones, but this is really low for a SATA SSD. I mean, Samsung SSD, I should be at least getting 400 megabytes per second, maybe even 500, and as you can see I'm getting much lower speeds than that on the read and write, which is just not good. So there's a couple of things we can do. One reason that I'm getting such slow speeds is this thing here, standard dual channel PCI IDE controller, and there's also another reason. Now this first optimization step doesn't apply to laptops, because laptops only have one SATA port on them for the hard drive. So this doesn't apply to laptops. I'll put a link on screen that you can click to skip this step if you are using a laptop. But if you're using a desktop machine, especially one that you built yourself, then I highly recommend you keep watching this step because it's quite an important one. So what you want to do is check your motherboard manual for your SATA ports on your computer. So I have quite a few, and the thing to note with mine, I've got 6 SATA 3 gigabyte per second ports, and I've got two SATA 6 GB per second ports. Now currently my SSD is only plugged into the 3 GB per second ports. So theoretically, if I connect that to a 6 GB per second SATA port in the computer, I should get almost double the speed that I'm currently getting. And now we'll do a little test and see what kind of speeds we're getting. 384, 390, almost 400, which is almost double what we were getting before, essentially. So quite a big difference. Now this is still lower. What you can do especially is look up online other people's tests results for the same SSD to see roughly what you should be getting. Again, it doesn't apply to laptops because you only have what you have, essentially. You can't pick and choose a different SATA port on a laptop. So yeah, it could still be faster than this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the BIOS to try and make it do a couple of tweaks in the BIOS. One is we need to fix this PC IDE-bad, and that will definitely increase the speeds even more. And then what we're also going to do is try and tweak some BIOS settings to make the computer boot into the SSD faster. Okay, so boot up the computer, start tapping either F2, F10, F8 or delete key to enter the BIOS. When you see the motherboard splash screen show up, you keep tapping one of those keys. You can find out online which key it is for your motherboard, and it will boot you into the BIOS. I have a password on mine. You won't unless you have set one up yourself. So I'm going to boot into the BIOS and I'm going to head into advanced mode. Now, depending on what kind of motherboard you have, if you've got like a gaming motherboard or if it's an older motherboard, your BIOS may be different. You might just have like a blue screen background and you can only use the arrow keys, you can only use the keyboard, no mouse control. Yeah, that can happen, but basically you'll still have similar options. So what you're going to want to do, if you have an advanced mode, head into advanced mode. If not, then it'll be somewhere around the top tabs. And what we're going to do is we're going to head into advanced and we're going to look at the SATA configuration. So look for anything to do with SATA. And what we're going to do is we're going to change the SATA mode from IDE to AHCI mode. That's an important one. Now, the issue with this is that if you change it to AHCI and then you save and it tries to boot into the operating system and it gets a blue screen of death when it's trying to boot up into the operating system, don't worry about it too much. You can just head back into the BIOS and change it back to IDE and then it will boot into the operating system just fine. But if that does happen, AHCI is a really good thing that will increase the speed of your SSD quite a lot, and it's definitely worth having enabled. So if you've just installed the operating system on your SSD and you've changed it to AHCI and it crashes on startup, then I would recommend you just reinstall your operating system on AHCI. So with this set to AHCI, reinstall your operating system because it will give you a good boost in performance. But if you've got too much stuff and you've got everything set up and you can't be bothered reinstalling the operating system again, then just leave it, I suppose. But it is a really good thing to have enabled AHCI. So what we're going to do after we have that set is we're also going to have a look in the boot options, and we're going to try and try and boot up a little bit faster, get through the whole BIOS stage a little quicker. So the first thing we're going to look at is the boot options. So I'm going to go to hard drive properties and I'm going to set the first boot option to my SSD, because I don't want the computer when it's booting up to check other drives first, because that takes time. I would rather it just goes straight to the SSD and boots straight from the SSD. So I'm going to select that as my number one option, and then I have to go to boot options in here and set the SSD above the disk drive. Normally it will try and boot from my DVD drive first, in case I have like an operating system CD inserted, but I'm going to switch that to the SSD so it boots straight from the SSD. Then I'm going to have a look at these options. So we've got full screen logo. Now this can sometimes help, sometimes it doesn't make a difference if you change this. If I disable it, I get more options. I've got wait for F1 error, I can turn that off. Post report 5 seconds, if I set that to 1 second so it doesn't take as long, then that should speed things up a little bit. And that's pretty much all I can do in this motherboard. Now if you're on a laptop, then lots of laptops have a quick boot option or a fast boot option or a skip something option. If you enable that, that really does increase the speed of the boot up on the laptop. It pretty much, it's like instant. It just, the motherboard logo flashes up for a split second and then it boots straight into the operating system. So if you have one of those options on your laptop, some kind of fast boot option, quick boot option, definitely enable it because it's lightning fast. Whereas desktops tend not to have as quick boot up as laptops do. So that's basically all we can do for now, and I'm just going to exit and save changes and reset. So I've gone ahead and increased the size of the windows here so that you can see this a little bit better. So what we've got now, we've got AHCI is now -OK, it's green, so that's sorted. So now we should get a little bit better speed, hopefully. Let's do another little test and see what we're getting. So almost 500 on the write and over 500 on the read. So yeah, definite huge improvement from the original when we first started off, when we were getting like 180 to 230. Now 500 and 495 is much higher. So yeah, that's pretty much everything sorted in here. Now if you get a little thing down in the bottom left, this one here that says the offset alignment, if that is red for you, then I'm going to show you guys what to do there. But if you've still got the MS AHCI -OK, if that's still red and it's still bad, then what you're going to do is go into the start menu, type in regedit, press enter, and you want to look for MS AHCI. So the way you access this, I mean, when you first open it, it'll look like this. You want to go into HKey local machine, system, then you want to go into current control set and services, and then when you scroll down on services, you will eventually find MS AHCI, and there'll be a start key in here. Now if you double click this and set that to 0, that's what you want to do. If it's on any other number, change it to 0. If it's on 0, then you should have MS AHCI-OK. And the other thing for this one, this is offset alignment. For offset alignment, you're going to need to download another program if this is red for you. And usually this will be red if you cloned a hard drive to your SSD. Say you had the operating system on the hard drive originally and then you cloned it to an SSD, then you can get this offset alignment error, and it can happen for various other reasons as well. But what you're going to need is to download AOMEI or AOMEI. I have no idea how you pronounce that, but you're going to download this Partition Assistant. It's free, and I'll put a link to it in the description. You go ahead and run this, and then again, this is only if you have the red for this section, the partition alignment part. And when it opens, what you want to do is select the SSD, right click on the main partition, go to advanced, go to partition alignment, and you should not have this message that says it's already aligned. It'll only say that if you have the green option on here, then they're already aligned. If you don't have this message, then they're not aligned, and what you'll have to do is click OK and then click apply, restart the system when it's finished, and it will go ahead and it will align the partitions and then reboot the system again, and your partitions will be aligned, and then you can open up ASSSD benchmark again, and this should now be green. So now that you have done all of that, what we're going to do now is do some operating system tweaks to try and get, well, make the SSD function better on the operating system, so it's faster and boots faster, and of course doesn't degrade in quality over time. That's a big one. So what we're going to do first of all is we're going to go to the start menu. We're going to type in advanced system settings. So advanced system settings, you can access this through control panel as well. And you're going to go to performance, click on settings, click on advanced, click on virtual memory, change, and uncheck. Well, to be honest, only do this if you have 10 gigs of RAM or more, I would say, because virtual memory, disabling this will, what virtual memory does is when you've filled up your RAM, all the RAM in your system, all the memory in your system, you filled it up completely, and your computer's still needing to store more data in RAM, it will store it on your SSD. That's what virtual memory will do. If you disable this, then you fill up the whole RAM, and I don't know, it's either just going to freeze or it's going to crash the system. But if you have more than 10 gigs of RAM, there's very little chance you're going to use all that RAM at once. Like, you're not going to fill up all that 10 gigabytes of RAM. So I would uncheck this box. I have 16 gigs of RAM, so I have no troubles disabling this. So I'm going to uncheck that box and then select no paging file. It will be on system manage size by default. You want to set no paging file, click set, click yes, and click OK. And that will disable virtual memory. Like I say, you have more than 10 gigs of RAM, you'll be fine. Even if you have 8 gigs of RAM, you'll probably still be fine. So once that is disabled, what you want to do is go to Startup and Recovery, edit the settings in here, uncheck Time to Display List of Operating Systems. That's only for dual boot systems. If you have 2 operating systems and it's gonna, wait 30. If you had this checked, it would wait 30 seconds for you to boot into one of the operating systems. If you uncheck this, it's going to wait 0 seconds. We only have 1 operating system, so there's no need to have this checked unless you have a dual boot system set up. So I'm going to click OK, and then we're going to go into System Protection. We're going to go to the C drive and we are going to configure and turn off System Protection. Now, again, you're only going to want to do this if you don't use System Restore, because this will stop System Restore from working. It'll disable System Restore, so if you use System Restore a lot of the time, then maybe don't do this. But if you don't use System Restore, I mean, I never use System Restore, I haven't used it in years, so I'm going to turn off System Protection. And what it does is it reserves a certain amount of space in on the SSD for System Restore backups and stuff like that, and it's reserving like 9 gigabytes. I would rather have that 9 gigabytes free space that I can use on my SSD rather than it being reserved for System Restore and stuff like that. So I'm going to drag that bar down to the bottom and click apply. You might be able to click delete and delete any previous restore points, which might give you some more space on the SSD as well. Click OK once you're done and you've turned that off, and that's us pretty much done everything in these system properties, I believe. Yep. Right, so now what we're going to do is you're going to go to start and you're going to type in disk defragmenter. So type in disk, then you've got defragmenter. Just make sure disk defragmentation on the SSD is turned off. If you have other hard drives in your system, then that's fine. You can schedule defragmentations for those, but don't defragment the SSD. I know there's talk that SSDs can suffer from fragmentation, but if you disable it, it's better, because if you're constantly running defragmentation on an SSD, it can damage it and cause problems. So we're going to configure schedule. You can turn off it completely or just select the hard drives only so that it doesn't run on the SSD. Once you've done that, the next thing we can do is go into computer, right click on your SSD drive, go to properties and select allow files on this drive to have contents indexed in addition to file properties. This will be selected by default. You want to uncheck this and click apply, and it will go through and it'll say, do you want to do it for subfolders and subdirectories? Just say yes to that. It will take a while. If it comes up with a message saying access denied, just say ignore all that are access denied, and it'll just do it to the files that you have access to. And that is easy. You just click apply and then OK, and that is that done. Now what we have to do is we have to check for to see if trim is enabled. That's the next thing. We need to do this with the command prompt. So if you type in CMD into your search bar, right click and run it as administrator. It's important you run it as administrator. Okay, and you're going to want to input this command, and I'll put it in the description so you can just copy and paste it into your command prompt. You're going to type this in or copy and paste this command in and press enter. It should say it equals 0. If it says it equals 1, then you're going to want to change it to 0 by pasting the same command in again and pressing space 0, and that will change the value to a 0. You want to make sure it is showing up as 0. That means trim is enabled. You don't want it to be disabled. So that is that. Also, hibernation is a good one to disable as well. It's something that gets configured when it's booting up, and if you have an SSD, it should be really fast. You should just be able to shut down your computer and start up again. You shouldn't need to put it into sleep mode or hibernation mode or any of that stuff. So we're going to turn off hibernation. To do that, we type in power cfg space -h space off. and that just turns hibernation mode off. Alright, so we're almost done. Just got a couple more things to go through. Again, go back into the registry by typing in regedit. And I know I am trying to skip, I'm like going over this kind of fast, but I don't want the video to be like 35 minutes long. So what we're going to do is go back in here, go to HKey local machine. What we're going to do here is we're going to disable prefetch and superfetch. So we go into HKey local machine, we go into system. Then we go, this time, instead of going into, we still go into current control set, but we don't go into services, we go into control this time. And then we scroll down till we find something called the session manager, which is right here. And then memory management, and then prefetch parameters. And in here, what you want to do, you'll see that you've got enable prefetcher, double click it, set the value to 0. And then superfetch, we need to disable that using services. So if we go on start, we type in services, go into services, scroll down until we find superfetch, which we're looking for. It's right here. If it's set to manual or automatic, you want to right click, go to properties, change the startup type to disabled, and click apply, and then OK. And that will disable superfetch. We've disabled prefetcher and superfetch. One last thing we need to do now is disable GUI boot. To do that, we go into, again, start, we type in msconfig, and we head to boot, and we select no GUI boot. That just turns off the little Windows animation that appears on startup, you know, the little starting Windows thing that comes up. That'll disable it, so you just get a black screen instead. It's just something that it has to, it's a less thing for it to have to launch or configure when it's booting up. So yeah, that all of these things we've done, click apply afterwards of course, will help. If you wanted to go into more detail, then you can go into services, hide all Microsoft services, and you can uncheck any services that you're not using. Make sure you know which ones you're disabling, because yeah, you don't want to disable anything important. And then in startup as well is a good one, disable anything in here. These are programs that launch when you boot into the desktop, so you can disable them from within here so that you get the desktop booted up a little quicker, not having to wait for certain applications to launch and stuff like that. So disable any in here that you're not wanting to boot on startup. And yeah, that's basically it. So, and you'll get this message. You can restart now, or you can exit without restarting and restart later. But that is essentially it. We've gone ahead and we have done all of these things, roughly the same read and write speed. So altogether, that is it. We've done what we set out to do. We've optimized it so that it boots faster. It's gonna not degrade in quality over time because we've disabled disk defragmentation and a bunch of other stuff, virtual memory and system protection and all that kind of stuff is now off, and we've freed up a little bit more space. I mean, I should have showed you this in the beginning, but it's not a lot. It's about 10 gigabytes. It's before I did any of the optimization tweaks, it said I had 186 gigabytes free. Now I have 198 gigabytes free, so we have freed up some more space on the hard drive by doing that as well. Oh, not hard drive, freed up some more space on the SSD by doing that as well. So that's basically it, guys. I'm just going to show you guys quickly. I'm going to boot up the test, and we're going to do side-by-side comparison. The one on the right-hand side of the screen is the optimized SSD, and the one on the left is our original boot up test that we did at the beginning of the video. And we're going to see if we get some faster speeds. So it shouldn't take, yeah, it should be quite fast now to boot up. So as you can see, not only was it faster at booting up, but when it did boot into the operating system, it launched Google Chrome, and it launched Google Chrome, and it launched NVIDIA GameWorks a lot faster than it did originally before the optimization. So overall, this should speed up your SSD by quite a bit, and I hope this did help you guys, and if it did, please leave a like on the video. I really do appreciate that, and subscribe if you have not subscribed already. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
shuffling.